What's up guys, Asian here again, and today we're going to be going over the PTS patch notes for Wrathstone. So this is patch notes version 4.3.0, the first of our probably 4 to 5 iterations of patch notes. So this particular DLC, the kind of hot topic here are the racial changes that they managed to introduce. I already went over through the patch notes. It doesn't seem like they've actually changed any of the racial passives from the post that they put up, I think it was like last week. So no changes there, although again this is only the first PTS iteration. We might see more in the 3rd week or 4th week changes to those racial passives depending on the feedback that they receive from players and the class reps. So this is a dungeon DLC, so this is not elsewhere. This is just introducing 2 new dungeons as well as a couple of rebalances to some sets, some class passives, as well as a couple of abilities as well. So just going through everything right now, we're going to be mainly focusing in on PvE changes or anything that might affect PvE balance. We will touch a little bit on PvP if I see appropriate and I feel confident enough to kind of comment on the changes, but mostly we'll be focusing in on PvE. We will not be obviously be talking about things like art fixes or glitches or anything like that that they've fixed or anything like that. So first off, the DLC itself, like I said, is a dungeon pack, so we get 2 new dungeons. So they're going to be Frost Vault and Depths of Melitar, and they are 4-player dungeons. So they introduce 3 sets as well as a Monster Helm set, so 8 total new sets are introduced with this DLC pack. Now, it does seem like that the skin does come from only the completing it on vets, so you don't need to do like vet hard mode no death in order to kind of get the skin. I'm kind of disappointed in that. I prefer to see it at the very least tied to getting all 3 of those achievements, hard mode no death and speedrun. But again, we'll have to see whether or not they change that like they did with Black Rose Prison back in Murkmire. So here are the new sets that they've introduced. This is from Frost Vault. The first set is Icy Conjurer, so max Magicka, spell damage, spell penetration, and then whenever you apply a minor debuff to your enemy, it summons a non-reflectable ice wraith that will charge into your enemy, dealing 18,920 frost damage over 4 seconds. This effect can occur every 12 seconds. I'm just going to turn down the music just a little bit here. So just for PvE stuff, this doesn't seem to be all that impressive because of the proc condition. You need to apply a minor debuff, but for PvP this might end up being something like Calurian's, a really strong proc that leaves a dot on you, and it's not reflectable either, so you can't really use Shimmering Shield or DK Wings to kind of reflect it. That also adds an additional spell pen, so that's really nice. So I think this is going to be more for PvP than PvE. The next set, Zogvin's Warband, a weapon crit physical pen. When you deal critical damage with light or heavy attack, you gain a stack of precision, increasing your weapon crit by 129 for 10 seconds, up to 10 stacks max. At max stacks, you also gain minor force, increasing your crit damage down about 10%. This is a fairly interesting set because it's kind of reminiscent of Advancing Osiris, except as a medium armor set. You do get that additional physical penetration there, so that's really nice to have. The overall weapon crit you're getting is going to be lower than Advancing Osiris. So Advancing Osiris gives you 2,000 weapon crit compared to the 1290 here. So it is a lower overall crit amount, but you also gain that minor force. So no longer, you won't have to necessarily worry about maintaining rearming trap anymore. So that basically gives you an additional spam bolt every rotation or so, which might end up giving you more DPS. So this will be interesting to see whether or not this will end up being paired with Advancing Osiris or a Reliquant instead. We're gonna have to kind of wait and see with that. The downside is, of course, if you are using this set to replace Reliquant, you are missing out on the minor Slayer bonus, so you kind of gotta want to take a look at that. Heavy armor set, Mighty Glacier, so it gives you Stam, Magicka, Stam, and Magicka Regen. And then when you cast a Snare or Immobilize ability or hit a target with a Snare or Immobilize ability, you and up to 11 group members gain Major Resolve and Ward for 15 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So overall, not particularly strong. I don't really see this being very useful because of the proc condition. You need to cast a Snare or Immobilize ability, of which there are very few in the game. There's pretty much only 1 per class, except for, I believe, Nightblades don't have a Snare or Immobilize. So I don't really think this set's going to be seeing too much use overall. Now, the Monster Helm set, the one piece adds Stamina, Magicka, and Health, so basically a triglyph there. When you block an attack, you gain an energy charge stack up to 1 stack per second. When you gain 6 charges, you release the energy, restoring 5350 stamina and Magicka and healing for 5350. After releasing the charges, you cannot regain new charges for 14 seconds. This is actually a very nice set for sustain tanks. So this basically, I did the math and it works out to be the equivalent of using a 116 cost ultimate every 20 seconds on a Dragonite if you want to compare it to Battle Roar. And you're using this basically for free as long as you're able to block and get those charges up. So really, really nice for sustain for sort of selfish tank set. This is definitely a monster helm that I'm going to consider getting for my tank, and just in case I do need that additional sustain for soul sustain stuff. So really nice. I think this is going to end up replacing Earthgore as monster helm set there. It's not going to be as strong as Earthgore, but the additional stamina and Magicka you gain back is going to be very, very nice to have. This basically acts as an Argonian potion passive for in a monster helm set form, so really nice to have there. Depths of Maltar introduces these 4 sets. So Auroran's Thunder, so it gives you health, spell damage, spell pen. When you damage a nearby enemy with a single target ability, you summon a cone of lightning from your chest for 3 seconds, dealing 1285 shock damage every half second to enemies in the cone. This effect can occur every 6 seconds. So the max health obviously is a downer. It's not going to be very strong in terms of DPS output. The proc is not terribly powerful. So this is probably going to be a decon set. I don't really see it used in PvE or PvP. Medium armor set, Scavenging Demise, adds weapon damage and 2 weapon crit. When you do a critical poison damage to an enemy, summon a Scavenging Maw, who, after 2 seconds, attacks the enemy, dealing 7,000 poison damage and inflicting minor vulnerability for 15 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 8%. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. Now, this is interesting because this might actually end up replacing, or potentially replacing, I should say, an Infallible Aether on healers. You just put this set on a stamina DPS. Critical poison damage is pretty easy to obtain in PvE with poison injection, and you basically have 100% uptime and minor vulnerability. Now, of course, this does come from a personal DPS hit, so that is kind of the downside of that. So you're basically giving up some personal DPS in order to boost group DPS, but the fact that you basically are able to provide 100% minor vulnerability uptime as a stamina DPS opens up a slot for healers to potentially wear another set instead. So this might see some use in PvE, but again, it remains to be seen whether DPS drop from using this set over Advancing Okada is going to be worth trading out that Infallible Aether on a healer. Frozen Watcher is the heavy armor set, so stam, health, stam. Summon a blizzard around you while blocking, inflicting 1000 frost damage every 1 second to enemies within your blizzard. Your blizzard has a 15% chance of inflicting chilled on enemies damaged. So this is interesting. I can see this being kind of useful for PvP, just because chill does provide minor maim, but there's probably more reliable ways of providing minor maim. In terms of PvE, this might be useful for 4-man content, and I'm thinking just Black Rose Prison to help burn down enemies a little bit faster. It is a proc set, so it is going to inflict at very least that 1000 frost damage, so this is going to be pretty useful, I think, for 4-man content, just trying to burn through trash and trash pulls and trials. So this might be a set that you might want to consider getting for a tank. Again, it remains to be seen, but this does seem fairly interesting as a set. Symphony of Blades is the Monster Mask set, so it adds 2% healing done, so we can already tell this is going to be a healer set. When you heal an ally whose primary resource is under 50%, you grant them Meridia's Favor, restoring 23-25 of that resource every 1 second for 6 seconds with an 18-second cooldown. Now, this does seem good on paper, however, there's already been testing done by a couple of people on the PTS as of the time of recording of this video. It does seem like it only hits one person, and that's kind of implied in the wording, an ally, not multiple allies. So you only get to hit one person with this resource return, so not overall not that great, and you actually are not able to practice on multiple allies. So that 18-second cooldown is from the proc from the healer. It's not a cooldown per person, so it only affects one person at a time. If it affected multiple people, then I think the set would be overpowered, so I do see why they make it only affect one ally. So this Monster Helm set actually isn't all that useful as we thought it would be, as we assumed it would be something like Spell Power Cure, where you can practice on multiple people, and the 18-second cooldown is per person. So this Monster Helm set overall looks good, but it really actually isn't all that great. They added in new collectibles here, so yeah, so this is where we mentioned that the skin is only on vet mode. It's not for getting all the hard mode, speedrun, no death achievements. Added in new furnishings. And now for the base game, they added in a new battleground, Eld Angvar, some new PvP collectibles, and they also updated some Cyrodiil sets. So these are sets that they were kind of old, and now they've introduced, kind of updated them a little bit here. So, Deadly Strike, it is now weapon damage, weapon crit, weapon damage, and it increases the damage your physical, bleed, poison, and disease damage over time abilities do by 14%. So this is interesting because, especially for PvE, because a lot of your damage abilities are considered damage over time. So, Endless Hail would be affected, Poison Injection would be affected, Renic Slashes, that bleed damage would be affected. So it'd be interesting to see how this affects PvE. You might be able to run this set instead of Advanced Yokeda, depending on whether that 14% increase in damage is overall damage or it's per tick damage. So the per tick damage would end up, I believe it would end up being the same no matter what. So we'll just have to wait and see for testing to see whether this set is going to be useful. Buffer of the Swift is now max Magicka, physical resistance, spell resistance, and reduces the damage you take from players by 10%. Celestial Order is now physical resist, spell resist, max health, and increases your health recovery by 1% of your sum total physical and spell resistance. So I'm not 100% sure what this is. I haven't been on the PTS yet to kind of see this, but health regen, this looks like a health regen build for if those are still a thing. They didn't add the set bonus here, but this is a Beckoning Steel. So Beckoning Steel is now spell resistance, max health, physical resistance, and now it generates an aura that causes you and 11 group members within the aura to take 10% less damage from projectiles. You can only be affected by one instance of Beckoning Steel. This has some interesting implications for PvE, particularly for progression style groups. For example, Vhoff, that first boss. This might be useful to kind of reduce the damage you take from maybe the poison injections that are coming out. This might be helpful perhaps as a maybe off-tank set in Asylum, or not Asylum, Cloud Rest, to kind of reduce the damage you take from the Dark Drain projectiles perhaps. I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but it is an interesting effect. Curse Eater is now max Magicka, Magicka regen, 2 Magicka regens, and whenever you heal yourself or an ally, remove 2 negative effects from them. If the negative effect was removed this way, your target restores 150 Magicka. This effect can occur every 2 seconds. Now this change is huge. I anticipate this being nerfed, because this is just insane. This is basically acting as a purge every 2 seconds for free, basically. It's just you have to give up a set bonus. The bonuses themselves are actually pretty nice, max Magicka and 2 Magicka regen. So for PvP, I can see this being really strong and potentially game breaking. If you just use something like quick mutagen or something, I forget what the other, quick regen, rapid regen. Every tick of that would probably have a chance of proccing Curse Eater, so this is pretty strong. I can see this potentially being nerfed, maybe increasing the cooldown from 2 to maybe 4 seconds or something like that. But even if they do that, the new Curse Eater is pretty nice overall. For PvE, you won't really see this being used too much, except for maybe purge heavy fights like Vhoff first boss. So this is going to be more for PvP. Sentry is now max stamina, weapon damage, weapon crit, and then when you begin to crouch, you gain stealth detection for 10 seconds. This effect can be activated every 30 seconds, plus you gain additional weapon damage here. Added in zone guides, so this basically gives you more information about each zone, what you can clear and things like that here. They introduced the Guild Trader UI interface, so once I hop on PTS, I will be able to show you guys what this is. I'm not going to be hopping on until after dinner tonight, so maybe in 2 or 3 hours. Add some new houses. They improved the rewards from your writs. They have a new motif introduced that you get from completing Black Rose Prison. New achievements, they are not increasing the champion point increase, so this is a change from older DLCs where they're actually no longer increasing the CP cap. So CP cap is now going to be halted at 810 for the foreseeable future until they reanalyze the system to kind of see how to rebalance it overall. So this is a nice increase, a nice way to combat power creep from the champion points increase. Added in an Elsewhere prologue quest, which you can now start up. And now Jester's Festival is coming up here soon. Templates to just introduce the new sets from Wrathstone. Now for all of these stuff, this is going to be for each DLC that they have introduced, so Clockwork City. So the big thing here is that for Asylum, St. Felms will now teleport the correct amount of times using his teleport strike ability. Not 100% sure what this means, whether the old 2 jumps during hard mode is still achievable or not, so we'll have to wait and see for groups to test this out to kind of see what this line actually means. For Dragon Bones, nothing too much here. Horns of the Reach again, nothing too much. So Doma House will actually no longer damage it on self and vet. We'll only use the shield on hard mode, so not a big change for hard mode, people who do this on hard mode, but for non-hard mode, you won't have to deal with that damage shield that happens after, I believe, 20% health, that last stone statue phase. Imperial City, nothing too much here. For Morrowind, again, nothing that is really relevant. Murkmire, nothing too relevant here. Just a couple of issues that were changed and things like that. So nothing to be really super concerned about. Orsinium, again, nothing to be concerned about. Somerset, nothing here. Thieves Guild, again, they did fix the bug in Maw of Locage, so the Dramatha Dreadstalkers, the archers, will no longer enrage on Vet. I believe this might have even been happening on normal, so this will be good to hear. And then the Skin Ryan Vashai, the aspects will now be accurately applied. It will not have some weird aspect stuff now. Wolf Hunter, no real changes. So now here we get to the real meat of things. So combat and gameplay rebalances. So fixed a couple of issues here. So if you're taking a target that's blocking, will now provide half the resources rather than none. Not that big of a change for PvE. Pets will inherit your bonuses and derived stats, so crit chance, crit modifier, champion point, and percent increases to damage and healing done. So this is of a very minor change. I believe pets have already had that crit chance and crit modifier, as well as CP, so I think the only change is that percent damage done. Proc sets will still not be able to crit at all. Enchants, so this is actually the very big change, this next one right here. Enchants on one-handed weapons will now be half the potency of those placed on two-handed weapons. This applies to damage and effectiveness. So I've already confirmed reports on the PTS from other players that this does affect Crusher enchants, weakening enchants, basically all enchants on one-handed weapons for tanks. So Crusher enchant on the Sword and Board is now half of the overall potency, so half of 2108. The backbar Frost or Lightning Staff is still at 2108, so it does seem like for tanks this is a pretty big change. You'll now have Crusher on the backbar for your staff, and you'll basically be expected to have Crusher uptime there. 100% uptime on Crusher uptime would be just basically using Blockade on the back bar in order to maintain your Crusher enchant now. For your front bar, it does seem like you're going to have to change perhaps to a Charged Shock enchant to help improve minor vulnerability uptime. If you're not using IA, you might be doing a Decisive instead for faster ultimate generation. So I personally am probably going to swap over to Decisive instead of Infused. So this is going to be a change for tanks. So buffs, debuffs, so they just changed it so major and minor evasion won't affect these morphs, these abilities anymore. And now abilities that provide major buffs that are not associated with healing or damage will now apply to a maximum of 12 people. So they just affected basically 4 abilities. So Frost Cloak and its morphs will affect 12 instead of 6. Multiple weapons will now affect 12 instead of 6. Rapids will now affect 12 instead of 2. Warhorn will now affect 12 instead of 24. So a nerf for Warhorn for PvP raids, but a buff for Frostcloak for Warden healers. So Dragonite, they just fixed a couple of issues. Nightblade, they fixed a couple of issues. So Sorks, so they just updated tooltips so they better indicate the damage. They reduced the cost of Boundless Storm by 34%, so that's just kind of rebalanced due to the changes they made to Major Expedition. The Implosion passive was changed. Now this passive is now a reverse execute mechanic and increases your damage against targets by 1% for every 10% health they currently have. So the minimum bonus is 1% increased damage done. This is a damage done modifier here. And so this is a little bit weird. So now at a full health enemy you have 10% damage done, but at 10% health remaining and lower you only have 1% damage done. So this is interesting. Implosion itself was actually a fairly weak passive, didn't actually proc all that often. So it remains to be seen whether this is a DPS buff or DPS nerf overall, especially when you consider the increase in damage done is going to be multiplicative, or I should say additive to all the other damage done modifiers. So I'll have to just do the math to kind of see how that ends up impacting things. And this is also reverse execute, so again, pretty strange. You would expect it to be just a normal execute, so 1% for every 10% health they don't have, but again, we'll have to see here. Overload, it fixed a couple of issues. Templars, so Solar Barrage, they increase the damage dealt by 10%, and now it grants infinite empower bonus during the entire duration, rather than 1 empower bonus after each tick. So basically this means that for 8 of your light attacks, you get the empowered bonus. So this is actually going to be really nice, and I think this might actually push Magpars ahead of Magicka Nightblades in terms of DPS. So we might have a new Magicka DPS king in terms of if you're able to play within melee range, just because Solar Barrage does require you to be within melee range. Even this said though, this might still push ranged Magpars ahead, even if you can't do the damage of Solar Barrage, just because of the way Purifying Light and Power of the Light, the bug works with the reflected damage. Fix an issue with Restoring Light here. Warden passive, they just fixed a couple of issues here for weapon abilities. For two-handed, for the heavy weapons, used to bleed applied from the axe by 12% and increase the damage bonus from the sword to 6%. Then for dual wield, they did the exact same thing, reduced the bleed from axe by 12%, and then they increased the damage bonus from each sword to 3%, so up to 6% total bonus. Fixed a couple issues with bow stuff. Destruction Staff, so now for Ancient Knowledge, you don't need to have Destruction Staff ability slotted anymore, you just need the Destruction Staff equipped. So this is going to be a nice change for a couple of different specs, particularly Magicka Warden, so now you don't need to have Crushing Shock or Force Pulse slotted anymore to get the Ancient Knowledge passive boost, which allows you to basically go full Animal Companions passive on your front bar now. A couple of issues for other abilities here, nothing all too much here. Inner Fire can now be procced at 12 meters instead of 18 meters. They fixed a couple of issues with Strategic Order abilities, Alliance War. The big thing here, Drop Maneuvers. It will no longer provide immunity to snares and mobilizations. Retreating Maneuvers will no longer remove current snares and mobilizations, and instead grant affected allies a bonus that reduces their damage taken from behind by 15%. So big nerf to Retreating Maneuvers now. So we'll have to see. I think this is probably more for PvP, obviously. I believe the other morph still will remove current snares and mobilizations, just from the wording from this, so we'll have to see whether that is the case or not. Purge is now working properly with the Magicka 8 passive. The ratios, again, these are completely unchanged. I just glanced through them really quickly, and they are unchanged from the what they gave us last week, so no changes at all here, nothing at all. So go see that previous video for the summary of all these passives here, but again, no changes from last week's kind of thing. So itemizations here, so they changed a couple of issues here. Deadly Strike is now only in robust instead of healthy, and drops some medium armor. Some more issues. So flanking strategist, you gain 400 weapon damage when you attack them from the side or the back. More issues that were fixed. Plagueslinger now correctly displays the radius, fires 5 instead of 4 projectiles, and 1 second instead of 1.5 second delay. Not sure what this means for PvP, because Plagueslinger is not used in PvE. Somebody else can kind of mention that or not. Kugams has been updated now, so you can't target the pet anymore, the little spider pet that comes out. But the big change is now it will last the full duration, and so this basically means you will get the full amount of healing and stamina over its complete duration, so a nice buff for PvE healers who are using Kugams. Then again, some more fixes here for Soldier of Anguish and Environment Shot. So now some base game fixes and improvements. So they said the snares from Scattershot and the Ice Ball can be purged now. They kind of expanded the zones between keeps and resources to get better credit assignment for attack and defense ticks. They increased the defense AP for keeps and outposts, so bigger D-ticks it seems like. And then Siege weaponry that applies dots will no longer break invisibility when you are hit by them. Then some other art animation stuff they fixed. Crafting economy, just a couple of fixes here. I don't believe there's anything here. They added Clam Gall and Powdered Mother of Pearl as rare rewards from Alchemy Writs, so new ways to get those instead of having to farm them for the summer set. I don't believe there's any other real changes here. Dungeons, just a couple of different fixes here. Nothing that really affects things too much. These are all base game dungeons anyways. So trials, this is a big change for Hell Raw. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the Yokeda Kai, the top boss, had a bug where basically the last 10% of their health, they basically was taking normal damage rather than the increased damage for the clones. So in order to fix this, they basically made the clones non-attackable. You can still interrupt them. They don't last as long when they're summoned. They can still be interrupted though, and they're now invincible. So you're now able to very easily tell which Yokeda Kai is the original, and now you can just interrupt rather than having to kill the clones themselves. So this, we're kind of joking around a little bit on toxic raiding environment. This generally will make the fight faster because now you can just burn Yokeda Kai, and the healer will be able to interrupt the clones as needed. Sanctum Affinia, they just made the synergy more responsive now and just fixed a, I guess this is a bug with the Manticora. Other than that, everything else here is pretty much just bug fixes and things like that. Nothing too much here that affects PvE stuff. So overall, the major changes that we're going to be seeing here are going to be from the enchant changes. So two-handed PvE for stamina DPS might be a thing now, just because now enchants on the Dual Wield are now basically half as strong. They still share the same cooldown, so you can't just use 2 poison enchants to basically make up that difference there. So two-handed stamina DPS might actually be better than or competitive with Dual Wield DPS. I will have to do some testing on the PTS to kind of see how this all plays out. Obviously the racial changes are the next big balance changes, and of course the new sets that are introduced might impact, at the very least, support roles. It doesn't seem like they're going to impact DPS roles too much, so it'll be interesting to see what the set changes are going to do for your support roles. But again, the biggest changes here are going to be the enchant changes for support roles, particularly tanks, and two-handed stamina DPS, kind of where they stand now. So bow builds and two-hand bow builds might be competitive with dual wield builds now, and they might even outparse them now. And then the ratio changes are the other big change for PvE and PvP. So that is it for this video. The full patch notes can be found in the link in the description below, as well as the video to the racial passes, because I did not cover them here because they are unchanged from what they gave us last week. If you guys have any questions, or especially for you PvPers, if you guys have any knowledge about the implications for PvP, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Again, I don't really PvP enough, so I am not confident in really giving a lot of feedback from the PvP perspective in terms of balance. So I would recommend for those of you guys who are interested in PvP to check out some other content creators that focus in on PvP, for example Feng Rush. I'm sure he's going to do something on the patch notes on his channel, either on Twitch or on YouTube. So that is it for this video. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.